So when I'm starting a new painting, I usually begin by drawing it out just to get a general sense of where everything's going to be and figure out the shapes. Then I seal the painting using matte medium and brush it over entire surface. As I get ready to begin, usually the sky, the background of the painting, I start mixing up all of the basic colors that will cover the various spectrum of the sky colors that I'm trying to achieve. I begin by blocking in kind of the gradation of the sky gradation and just kind of build it up and smooth it out. I paint a lot of wet into wet with my acrylic. And then I'll start to come in and I start blocking in the basic cloud colors and shapes, just kind of putting them down very flat graphic shapes until I get the entire surface covered. Once I have that blocked in, I will go in with multiple brushes, glazing lightly and kind of building up and transitioning, softening up the more graphic forms that I initially laid in there to get those soft clouds. I use my fingers a lot too, just to soften up. Sometimes when I'm painting, I'll put colors down and then I just don't feel like they're necessarily working, so I'll go back in and readjust the colors. In this case, I'm lightening and giving a little bit more warmth onto the side lighting on those trees there in the background. And I tend to just jump around to various areas as interest strikes me. And I'll go back in, I'll start to block in at this point. I'm starting to figure out the shapes and the colors for the hills in the background. A lot of times I don't completely cover the shapes because I'm just trying to figure out whether the shapes and colors are working, and I'll go back in and layer them up as I go. And here you can see I tend to hold multiple brushes, especially when I'm working in an area, and each brush has a different color on it, so I just flip back and forth between the different brushes to determine the different shapes and colors and whether or not I like where they're going. Now I'm trying to figure out the shadow colors and if the shadows are working against the sunlit side. Again, it's a lot of back and forth as I will put shapes in, and then as I start to look at the whole, I'll decide that things work or they don't work and make those adjustments. I usually work in the background first with the sky, then I work into the middle ground, and then I'll come forward into the foreground. And every now and then I'll bring the black in, sometimes just to get a better sense. I'll start to put the black and some of the outlining in before I'm actually there. Still trying to patch in and figure out some of those areas where there's a little bit too much busyness. I'll go in and start to simplify so that I can create that sense of depth. I often end up changing the colors multiple times as the painting comes together because they're not working. And what I'm doing now is just kind of adding a bit of blue. I felt like the colors were a bit too saturated in the back hills, so I'm kind of toning them down a little bit, neutralizing them. Blue's a complement there to the orange, and also it is kind of the color of the sky, so to give it a bit more atmosphere, I was modifying the colors. Now I'm going in and adding a little bit more contrast to the shadow forms. And then with the tree, I'm bringing in a little bit of the orange brown to have some of the dead pine needles that were in the trees. And just a lot of times it's just a lot of coats. Painting with acrylic, sometimes I'm putting 3-4 coats, maybe more sometimes depending on the color. Some colors are more translucent. As I get to that final stage, then I start outlining in black Not everything gets outlined. Usually I'll outline vegetation, some key rock formations, and as I finish up, I'll do a dark outlining too in kind of like the mid-range areas. But each painting is different and requires something different. I hope you enjoyed this making of video. Here's the final image completed for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for visiting.